Hi, it's the Choppiness guy. Welcome to today's episode of Vestibular Talks. Today's special guest is Amanda. Amanda is the editor, creator, in chief of the digital magazine called My Chronic Brain. We're going to discuss chronic illness, more specifically migraines, and we're going to discuss how Amanda raises awareness about migraine conditions on her social media accounts. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy the episode. Find your choppiness, guys. Hi, Amanda. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Great, thank you. Welcome to this episode of Vestibular Talks, and
Thank you.
thank you for taking the time to join us and be part of this program. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome, Amanda. Do you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and how your journey began?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Amanda. A lot of people know me online as Mia. I was diagnosed 2005 with
Okay.
migraine. It happened. I had been in a car accident and had gotten a concussion, and so they were like, "Oh yeah, it's migraine, not a big deal." But the big deal is that the migraine never left. So I've actually had like one continuous or overlapping attacks since 2005. So it has a variety of names. Every doctor has given it a different name, but it's essentially just chronic migraine that doesn't go away.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty harsh. And Amanda, prior to that incident, did you experience like the regular headache every now and then, or it was just very seldom that will happen?
yeah, I mean, I got headaches every now and then. I live in the southern United States, so pollen season was always, a murder. You get the sinus headache, but I had ended up going to the doctor about these because it was unlike anything I had experienced. Like I literally thought I was dying, because the pain is so intense and so focal that like I was convinced I had like a brain tumor or something. So it's really a unique sensation.
Yeah, yeah. Did they ever do any testing like MRIs or CT scan to see and diagnose?
Yeah, that's a good question. They do. They did a variety of tests. I've had more MRIs than I can count. I've had CT scans. I've had like a variety of imaging. The thing is, migraine is a functional disorder as far as we can tell right now. So it doesn't show up on the MRIs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the good news is, hey, you don't have a brain tumor. Bad news is that means it's migraine. So,
Yeah. The
yeah.
word migraine, Amanda, as you know, it has a stigma with people are like, oh yeah, I get headaches too. Like people just kind of like brush it off. But as
Yeah.
you said, like for most people, a headache is episodic. They get the headache, they go to sleep, they wake up, they are fine, or they take an over-the-counter medication and then they are fine. But for people like us, when it's chronic, it's consistent. Like it's episode after episode after episode after episode, and it just kind of doesn't give you a break in between. What other symptoms do you experience other than the actual headache itself?
That's such a good question, because it's not just that it's coming and coming and coming with a headache. Like it's a whole host of neurological symptoms. So I have migraine with aura, and that means that I get a bunch of sensory issues with mine. I can go blind. I get what's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where things look too big or too small. Yeah, you're nodding your head. You're like, yeah, I got that. I can get pins and needles. I can get change in my taste. I was recently, about 3 years ago, diagnosed with hemiplegic migraine, which is a form of migraine with aura. It's very rare, and it basically mimics stroke. So I lose the function in the right side of my body. My language gets all messed up. It's actually quite scary.
Yeah, well, no joke. Yeah.
Yeah, but it fully reverses. So whereas stroke is causing brain damage, and that's what's happening with migraine, it's this electrical storm that's happening that's causing the disruption. So when the storm ends, then I get full use back. So
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of a relief that you can at least kind of like regain your mobility and your senses. Yeah. Um,
correct.
Well, Amanda, so when you got diagnosed with these migraines, what did they offer? Any sort of treatment, any sort of therapy that could help you out?
Nothing at first. I went in and he said, "This is migraine. You need to be less stressed." I was still in university, and I got diagnosed around exam time. And so he was like, "Oh, it's, exams. You need to relax and all this." And that actually persisted for about 5 years. I had doctors tell me I was stressed, it's anxiety, you're not sleeping right, you drink too much caffeine. It was a lot of good and important things, but it just wasn't enough for me. So, they tell me try yoga. So I do yoga. It doesn't fix what was going on. It helped, but it didn't fix it. And it took I want to go with 8 years. It was about 8 years before I actually had a doctor tell me there was medication I could take for it. I had just been trying like over the counter Tylenol and Advil. And the first time it was Fioricet, which isn't even something you really want to be on very long. It has the caffeine and Tylenol and everything in it. It was magic, because even though my pain and symptoms never go away, to have them come down, it was like the first glimmer of hope that I had had. Like, there's something. So now, I'm on a whole host of preventative medications and acute medications, and I'm on lifestyle changes. And so, I could list it, but that would take your whole show.
But have you found that the medication itself does help? Because some people, as you know, this is trial and error medication. No medication is going to work the same for all of us.
Right.
So people try, let's say, antidepressants like amitriptyline, and they get excellent results. Other people try them and they aggravate the symptoms, or they just don't do anything whatsoever. So they try something different and then something different, and they don't feel like anything is like a proper treatment plan. How about for you? Have you found something that kind of like keeps you like a stable level?
That's a tough answer. So the answer is, I have found things that make life more bearable. I have found things that help me have control over the symptoms, so that they don't spiral out for days and weeks on end. But I haven't found that magic bullet. So for me, it's constant trial and error and adjusting what we're doing. And I honestly, I think that the body changes as well as the disease progresses. So what worked for me, 5 years ago might not be working for me now.
Yes.
So yeah. And then, as you said, sometimes you take something and you're like, did you give me a sugar pill? Like, nothing happened.
Yeah. And what you just said, the body changes. That's so true, because we're made so perfect that our bodies adapt to things so quickly. So so I noticed, or even not necessarily adapt, but when our bodies know that something is not right, they fight it. Because I've been in medications that they start me with a low dosage, and I started perfectly fine. They said increase it a little bit, and I increase it, and my body's like, no, and their symptoms enhance. And the doctor is like, no, but that should be the ideal dosage. And I'm like, I know my body, and I know this is not working. So I have to go back to the other one. And some people experience the opposite. Some people have to keep increasing and increasing and increasing, because they don't find relief in the low dosages anymore. So our bodies are so like in tune that it's difficult to program them to know exactly what works. So it's trial and error.
Exactly. And I love what you said about, I know my body. And it's so important to have that dialogue with your doctor and with yourself of like, no, I know this is supposed to work, but it's not. Like, what can we do differently? So
yeah. Amanda, you mentioned lifestyle changes, which I myself have experienced. You mentioned managing stress levels. That's great. I do yoga as well. I do breathing therapy, exercising, things that keep me grounded, type of thing, right? I changed my diet. For a lot of people, diet is not a trigger. For me, it is. Like, it's certain things that I eat, I feel it right away, go to my head. So what has worked and what hasn't worked for you?
Lots of things have worked and lots of things haven't worked. So some of the biggest changes that have helped me have been, I do not have caffeine, like ever. I had to completely take it out, all the way down to chocolate, which was such a heartbreaker. And I try to reintroduce it, but that for me, for some reason, my body just doesn't like the caffeine. And my headache specialist actually had me come off of gluten, which I thought he was crazy, but that seemed to help me a lot too. I'm very careful with my sleep schedule. For me, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, being woken up, these are all big issues that affect how I feel the next day.
Yes.
And then one key piece, which I mean, I hear people talk about it, but not so much, was learning to accept that pain is going to happen and these symptoms are going to happen, but that it's okay and that it passes. So I did a lot of work with a therapist and a lot of work learning how to do meditation, because especially like with the rarer form of migraine, it can be really scary. Like the pain can be scary, losing control can be scary, and my fear response made it worse.
Yes.
And so although that's not really a trigger management, it made a big difference in the overall calming down of my symptoms.
I completely agree. When we go into this state of chronic illness, it's easy to feel anxious because your life changes. Your life changes completely.
Yeah.
So you feel that you're losing control. So I agree. I also saw a therapist. I saw a psychologist, and a lot of people. That's also another thing that has a stigma. People think, oh well, I'm not crazy, so I'm not going to a psychologist, and it has nothing to do with being crazy. It has a lot to do with having the tools, the proper tools that you need in order to manage your specific situation. So I agree that talking to someone is makes a big difference.
It's really helpful. They're helping you in that journey. They're not saying that it doesn't exist, you know, and very helpful.
Amanda, something that triggers me as well, and many people also experience it, weather changes. How is it for you?
I'm very lucky that weather does not impact me.
Okay.
The only impact I get is I'm very photosensitive to sunlight, apparently. So I can do artificial light for a while, but sunlight, that's a trigger. But not anything else, which is good because we get thunderstorms all summer. So
yeah, that'll be a hard one for sure.
Yeah.
Amanda, I know you raise a lot of awareness on your Instagram accounts. You are very you talk facts, like you say. When you go into a topic, you describe the facts and you say it as it is. How have you found the response of people on social media? Do you think that they are very supportive and grateful that you're teaching all these facts, or you think that they become defensive because they are afraid that the reality that you're showing them might push them into being scared or being afraid of their own condition?
It's a bit of both. The majority has been very positive. I've had a lot of feedback of people saying, oh, that's what's going on, or oh, my friend has this, now I understand. But I do get some people who are defensive, and I think one of the biggest things that causes that defensive reaction is when I emphasize that this is currently it's a chronic lifelong condition that doesn't have a cure. And for me, a cure means it's not going to happen again. And people are like, no, you can cure it with this and this and this. And that's when they become defensive. I'm like, no, you can manage it really well, but there isn't a cure yet. And if I don't speak that truth, then how am I going to be able to say, like, okay, let's raise money for research and let's fight to get some of these medications into the hands of people who can't afford it? And yeah, it's mostly good, but a little tricky sometimes.
But you described it right. Like, I'm sure they have good intentions at heart, but it's because they are afraid that when you mention that it's a chronic condition, it's almost like they go into that stage of like, no, it can't be, like there has to be a cure type of thing. So they become defensive on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, which makes it hard for you because you're trying your best to educate people, and some people just get very defensive. That's the word. They get defensive towards that. Amanda, you have another page in which you are the chief and editor of My Chronic Brain. Can you tell us a little about it? How you got involved with that idea? What is it that you publish in there?
Yeah, oh my goodness, I love that project. So I told you when I got diagnosed, I wasn't really offered any treatments. And so I went online and I didn't really know what I was looking for. And as my disease progressed, it was harder and harder for me to process information. I didn't have the energy to read 8 websites to find the piece I needed. I would read an article and I go, that's really great, but, and then chronic migraine caused it to be different. A good example being, take your acute treatment at the start of an attack. I'm like, that's so good. I don't have a start. It started like, forever ago. So I had been talking with a friend of mine, Jen Heater, and I was like, well, let's put together a newsletter where we can kind of summarize what's going on and share it with people. And as we connected with other advocates in the chronic migraine sphere, our newsletter turned into a full-on digital magazine, which we now publish. And it's entirely focused on equipping chronic migraine patients to live better lives. It's not just going to tell you about medication. It's going to tell you about ways to manage mental health, ways that you can try eating. It gives the experience of patients, of caregivers, of children, of elders, all these different people that it's otherwise hard to hear their voice, because there's some amazing organizations out there. But yeah, so that's what we do. And the people who are on this project are amazing, and they're donating their time and their skills. And so we're able to actually offer the magazine as a free digital download. You have to pay if you want it in print. We do that at cost. We don't make any profit, but it's available for free. If you just go to mychronicbrain.com, and you can get it as a PDF or an ebook. You can get it on Apple Books. So yeah, the goal is get the information out there.
That's very nice. And it's I was checking through your page today on Instagram, to the My Chronic Brain page, and it's very very informative and very well directed, so the information is easy to understand. Like, it's not complicated to understand it. Like, it makes sense when you see it, you read it, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
So thank you. That's exactly what I want to hear. I mean, you have enough going on in your brain with chronic migraine. You don't need to try to figure out what's going on. So we try to balance like regular language and jargon, because you kind of need to know those special words, but just call it what it is.
Amanda, as you know, there are different types of migraine. Like, they have different classifications. For example, my diagnosis is vestibular migraines. So rather than the actual headache pain itself, which I do get sometimes, I get dizziness, constant dizziness. It's like you said, you have a continuous migraine going on and on. So do I, but mine is with dizziness. Like, the dizziness is every day. And people tell me, how is that possible? And I'm like, I don't know. I wish I had an answer, because if I knew, I'll get rid of it. But but it's consistent. Yet, how do you feel all these different types of migraines, vestibular migraines, the one that you mentioned earlier that paralyzes your body, the one that you have, which is the constant pain? How do you feel they all connect us? Like, how all of us sufferers, what do you think we have in common that brings us into that one group together of migraine?
Wow, I feel like I could do like a whole doctorate thesis on that, and I'm not sure I could. I'm not sure I can answer it. But as far as from where I am sitting and looking at this, it seems like there's some sort of issue with how our nerves are sending and receiving information. So, I mean, the headache is what we focus on because it's horrible. But as you just pointed out, there's so many other symptoms, and it's like your brain is kind of going crazy, and that's kind of what unifies it. So there's like vestibular migraine. My grandmother actually has what's called abdominal migraine. She doesn't get the headache. She just gets this, cyclical vomiting issue. I have hemiplegic migraine. So I was originally actually diagnosed with retinal migraine, which was just the visual disturbances. And so for me, it just comes down to that there's something not quite right that's happening in the firing of the neurons. And I hope someday we'll be able to test for it, but.
Yeah, and that what you just said, like the firing of the neurons, my family doctor, I told him the other day, I said, I'm having like this weird pain in my spine, and it's like shooting down my arm, down my leg, like it's making my fingers numb. I'm like, do you think it could be migraine related? And he giggled. And I said, why are you giggling? He's like, because you know what, Johan? Migraine does what migraine wants to do. He's like, migraine is in your brain controls everything, and it's like an electric storm happening all over the place. And he's like, so migraine can affect your digestive system, your nerves, your pain ending nerves anywhere in your body, your vision, your hearing. And he's like, I'm not saying that these symptoms are migraine related, but they could be, because migraine does whatever migraine wants to do. And I was like, oh yeah, you know what, he's right. Like, It's so weird because there are some symptoms that you will never associate with migraine because you think how is that even connected? But it could be.
Exactly. And then I've seen, hopefully with myself in the future, but with other patients, as the migraine attacks come more and more under control, symptoms they hadn't connected with migraine come more under control.
Yes.
So.
Yes, Amanda, you mentioned earlier that your doctor suggested coming out of gluten. I did it as well. It was hard at the beginning because our diet is so based in gluten stuff like bread and like I don't know, like tortillas.
It's in everything.
And like cakes, pastries, like what almost everything has gluten in it. So at the beginning I was like, shoot, what am I gonna eat now? But eventually I managed to get it out of my diet. I don't miss it too much, but I do miss it sometimes. But have you found any relief or any difference in your symptoms by just eliminating it?
Yeah, that was one of the few things that I have done so far that made a massive difference. I took it out, and within about a week, I was like, I think I'm feeling better. By the first month, second month, third month, I mean, it was really night and day. So now I can tell if I've had gluten within about 24 hours. I don't know the science behind it. My doctor said that there's some research because you have the brain-gut connection, so those two are communicating. And so I was diagnosed with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which just means there's some sort of allergy happening to gluten. And his theory is it's causing an inflammation response. So that slight time delay makes sense, but yeah, it made a big difference. I miss bread though, like fresh from the oven bread.
You and me both. I read a book, Amanda, a while back that talks about what was it again? This Stanton protocol. Yes. So she talks about that. She talks about the gluten connection, and she also mentions fruits. She says that basically glucose, anything that has glucose like rice, fruits, gluten, that those things become basically sugar in our body so quick that it causes a rush of gluten into our fructose and sugar basically into our blood system, which overwhelms our minds. So what she says, basically the point that she makes is that the migraine itself happens because of an electrolyte disbalance in our bodies. So she suggests drinking water with salt. You drink it, or you buy a drink that has electrolyte, like Pedialyte, or I drink something called 40,000 volts. You put it in a spoon, mix it with water, and drink it. And you know what, Amanda? I don't know if it's the placebo effect that in my mind I'm like, hey, this lady says that this is gonna work, but when I start to feel the headache coming and the symptoms aggravated, I do that. I do the salt and water, or I do the 40,000 volts in water, and I do feel better. And I notice that when I do eat a lot of fruits that contain high sugar, like watermelons, mangoes, blueberries, that the symptoms kind of like get a little more active. So have you noticed that within yourself, that when you eat something that has gluten or fructose or sugar in it, does it make you feel any weird, any different?
Yeah, the gluten definitely increases my symptoms. I describe it as it puts my symptoms kind of on a hair trigger, so it's a lot easier to trigger what's going on. I haven't really noticed a difference with other foods like that, save caffeine. But I do have a connection to having low blood sugar and having my symptoms get worse. So if I'm not careful to keep my blood sugar levels kind of steady, then it'll get worse. And I'm wondering, hearing what she said, I haven't read this, but it kind of makes sense to me, because when my blood sugar goes off, then my symptoms get worse. So
she basically says there is an electrolyte disbalance, that if we keep our electrolytes at level where they should be, then the symptoms should kind of keep at bay as well. Amanda, with all the research that is happening, all the raising awareness, the funding that comes in, the new migraine medications, as you know, where do you see this going in the next 10, 20 years? Do you see that we're going in the right path, where we're trying to hopefully eventually find a cure, or you feel that it's so broad and so difficult to pinpoint migraines that we gonna continue going in our research for many more years?
I'm a chronic optimist. And so I hold out hope that we're on the right path. I mean, the CGRP therapy in particular has been so life-changing for so many people that it makes me think we're on the right path. It's not working for everyone because migraine's different, but we're onto something there. And we're coming out with more electrical stimulation devices. There's the Safley, there's the Gamma Core. And so I'm optimistic that we're on the right path. I like to hold on hope. If you don't have hope, it's, it's not so good. So I'm going to go with yes, but I do say that the brain is an incredibly complex organ. And as you said, this is a full body problem. So in order for us to get to that cure, we're going to have to do a lot of work. We're definitely not there yet. So that's why I keep pushing for awareness and advocacy for research so that hopefully we'll get there someday, because I would love to be able to have, grain kids and them read about migraine in textbooks or hear about it from me, but not have to experience it.
Now, what you just said, that you love to have your grandkids in the future listen about it, but not having to experience it. As you know, many doctors believe that there is a hereditary component to these conditions. Has anybody else in your family suffered from migraines?
Yeah, it's very strong on my mother's side. So all of the female women up my mother's line, we have all developed migraine. We thought that one of my sisters had avoided it, but she just got diagnosed this past spring, which means it's every female as far back as we can remember.
Yeah.
So,
and that makes women more than men for some reason. I don't know if it's a hormonal thing or what, but it does affect women more frequent than it does men.
Yeah.
Which also guides my next question. For me, when they diagnosed me with this, they did a whole bunch of tests to rule out all the different conditions, and they found out that my testosterone level, for whatever reason, was down, like completely dropped down. And they said, hey, you need to take this cream to make your testosterone go up, or exercise a little bit more. Do you find that with yourself? And it's a very personal and intimate question, and I apologize for it. Do you find that when most women, when they hit their cycle, their migraines intensify? Is it similar for you, or is it just usual, the same level?
Oh, definitely. I get, without fail, a very, very bad worsening of symptoms, perhaps 2 to 3 days before my cycle will start, and it's completely debilitating. The last 2 times I've been in the emergency room has been for that type of attack. And I'm not alone in that. The hormones play a role. And, it's, for a lot of women, it's not just something you can avoid, so.
Yeah. And, I've heard that many women also develop their migraines after pregnancy. For some reason, like their hormones just go out of whack somehow, and it triggers this constant migraine. Amanda, have you ever experienced with your migraines any vestibular symptoms of their own, like dizziness or the nausea or the feeling that you're like spaced out, like derealization, when you feel like you're in a dream-like state? Like, have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm still learning about what classifies as a vestibular symptom. My mom has vestibular migraine, but she doesn't have very many episodes. But I've met a lot of friends online who do. So I do get vertigo, but it's rare. I don't know how you all live with vertigo more often than that. But I do get derealization, which I actually just found this last week was part of a vestibular symptom. It's like that you don't really feel like you're in your body or the world, or like, it's very, very strange. And I do get that one fairly often, and it freaks me out.
Yeah, it's not fun.
But yeah, I get that. And then sometimes I'll get dizziness. I get hit much more with the other senses, and especially light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, and nausea. Those are the ones that really kick me. So
there are 2 things, Amanda. One thing you mentioned, and I know there's a connection to it. You mentioned allergies. You said that where you live, the allergies trigger your symptoms. And in that book, the Stanton protocol, the lady talks that for whatever reason, when migraines become chronic, somehow your allergies also become chronic. And I experienced that. I've never in my life had allergies. I have 4 dogs, but when this vestibular condition started, I always had, I started having sinus infections, and then what's it called, postnasal drip. Like it's a constant, you keep like a constant flow. It's gross, mucus in the back of your throat. But I went to the doctor, and he's like, oh yeah, you have allergies. I'm like, but I never had allergies. He's like, well, welcome to the club. You have allergies now. So
Interesting.
yes. So do you notice and feel that there is a connection between your allergies or allergies themselves and migraines as well?
You know, I really don't know. I've had allergies since I was a little kid. So my personal experience is that they've stayed the same. However, that said, this immune response that I've been diagnosed with to gluten makes me think that there has to be some sort of immune issue. So whether the immune system is interacting with the brain, whether it's triggering the brain, whether they're the same system eventually, I don't know. Like, I'm not a doctor, but it's very interesting to think on. For me, it's mostly just now that I have chronic migraine, I have to be careful with taking things like decongestants. My doctor has kind of put me on a permanent ban. So allergy season is worse, but whether they're connected for me, I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, and especially because the second thing that I was going to mention is migraines somehow also affect your blood circulation, the way how blood circulates through your body. So in the winter, I started developing something called Raynaud's
Oh,
disease.
yeah.
So my fingers go like purple, and it's almost like I'm not getting enough blood flow to my fingers. And the doctor said, the neurologist said, "Oh yeah, that is connected with migraine." I'm like, how so? He's like, "I don't know the mechanics of it, but somehow it affects the way how blood gets pushed to your extremities." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's great. That not only one thing I have to deal with, but
Indeed.
now this it's like a domino
Yeah.
effect. It's like migraines click, and it's like boom, 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 boom. Everything else comes. So
Yeah.
it's so weird how everything is so interconnected to this migraine condition. Like it's just strange. Amanda, if people wanted to find out more about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram. I'm at Just Breathe Mia. Yeah, that's probably the best place to get me. I'm pretty active on there. I don't always post on my grid, but I keep my stories up. And then you can see my work at mychronicbrain.com.
Awesome. You also have My Chronic Brain on Instagram as well, right?
Yes, that's on Instagram too. Please don't tell our volunteer who helps with that I forgot to say that. It's fantastic though. It's wonderful. And that will kind of give you snippets of what is in our newest edition, and then we put in little new goodies there as well.
Awesome. Amanda, what does the future hold for Amanda?
The future for me is hopefully just going to keep improving my wellness so that I can do more of what I want to do, and to embrace, it sounds so ridiculous, but honestly, to just embrace moment by moment so that when I have bad moments, I let them go, and when I have good moments, I enjoy them.
That is key, what you just said, because it's part of your mental peace. Like sometimes the hard days are so hard that you almost want to quit and give up. You're like, this is too much. But then when you have a good day, you feel like the joy of the world just came to you. You're like, yes, finally a good day. So it's learning to balance those two and understanding that, yes, there are going to be bad days, but hopefully we can manage them and make them more good days than bad days.
Yeah.
Amanda, my last question to you is, as you know, this channel is called Find Your Chappiness, which means find your happiness. So how does Amanda find her chappiness?
Oh my goodness, I love art. I recently took up watercolor, and I find it so relaxing, and it just gives me such joy. I'm not any good at it, but I enjoy it. And yes. I think, that's part of finding your happiness, is you find something you're passionate about and you run with it. So between watercolor and working in the migraine community, I got my dog. That's how I find it.
I got 4, so I got lots of chappiness going on. Yeah. All right, Amanda. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are a complete universe of knowledge. Your pages are very informative, so I invite everybody to come and check them out. And then, yes, keep up the great work, because you're making a difference. Whether you know it or not, you're making a difference.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.